right, so this really shouldn't be an issue here in a brand new home. And this is unfortunately very common in a lot of shower builds. I want to show you a problem that is really problematic in this industry. A lot of new home builders still don't know how to build showers. So I want to go through on how we're going to repair this situation and give you some tips on the right way to go about doing a shower so it's foolproof and you'll never have any issues. Hopefully we can see. Yeah, you're gonna have to try to. Okay.
You're on.
Okay, so this is a really decent sized shower. It's probably really echoing because it's all tile. Really beautifully done. I mean, whoever did the tile work did a pretty good job. So when you first come into a tile shower like this, you're like, well, the tile setter definitely knew what he was doing. But unfortunately, there's water coming up out of the grout joints. And you can actually hear this. So you see how all that water is coming up out of those grout joints? I mean, it's all, basically the shower drain is, the shower pan, they most likely did a rubber liner and it's not draining. So water's just sitting here and then it's gonna crack all these joints. You know, having that much water saturation is gonna be a problem. So this is, when I first came in here, like this is a little like screen guard I took out of here. And I could immediately see that this was a clamping type of drain. So this is kind of your most common type of drain that people used to install. It just has, most likely there's a rubber liner underneath of there that connects to this. And then this obviously, you towel up to it. But the problem is it's most likely there's no pre-slope underneath the rubber liner. So these systems with this type of drain are designed so that when water gets through the actual tile layer, which it will, you know, grout is not waterproof and it's not really meant to be. You know, it does have some ability to fight off some of the water, but over time, water is going to get underneath of the tile and then it'll basically saturate the mud bed underneath of the tile. And then in a proper system, you have a pre-slope underneath the rubber liner that goes down into this drain. So it will saturate the mud bed and then have exit out of the weep pools around this drain. That's really, you know, that's the way they used to do it. It's really like a poor method in my mind. I don't see any reason why you would want to saturate the entire mud bed with water. It works functionally fine when you have a pre-slope and everything's exiting the system. But when you have an area where it's not moving, these are the type of issues you're going to have. So this has only been 7 years. It doesn't smell in here yet. But if you leave this the way that it is, it's most likely going to end up smelling like mildew. You know, bacteria is going to grow in that because the water is not moving anywhere. And then over time, as you can see, it's already moving. So it's most likely the tile is going to end up lifting and having issues. First thing is, so this is a repair job. And unfortunately, there's really no easy way to go about this. It's just a matter of taking that first row of tile out. I'm going to use a grout removal bit so that you can see this has some diamonds on it. It's a little expensive little tool here, but it's really going to be the best way. You have to get rid of that grout in order to be able to pull out the tile. Now, this is where the real problem happens when it's, you know, more than 10 years old, is trying to match up this existing tile. Fortunately for me, on this one, they had all the exact same tile, so I'm able to just kind of look like I was never here. But that is one thing that if you have an issue with an older shower, you might not be able to match up the tile easily. You're just going to have to find something else that's going to, you know, be as close as possible. So we're going to remove the bottom tile. You know, the chances of you trying to remove this and keep it all in one piece is not going to be practical. This is most likely ceramic, I believe. So it's going to fall apart. And if it's done right and the thin set is really well bonded, it's going to come off in pieces anyways. So let's go ahead and remove the first row of grout and then start pulling out the side tile here. So the important aspect is make sure that you get everything cut through there, because when you pull some of this out, it wants to pull some of the grout up against this tile. So if you have this completely cut, you shouldn't have any issues. You know, the main thing you're trying to prevent is chipping any of this major tile that you want to leave. All right, so let's go ahead and pull this mud bed out. Probably won't be all that difficult since it's already kind of cracking here. So let me just get I'm gonna get my chipping hammer. All right, so this is probably another reason there's no guard for your weed pulls. Normally they have gravel right around the weed pulls, and this is just cemented completely to it. So there's no gravel whatsoever. So these are the weed pulls right here. See these little tiny holes right here? All the way around here. So you're supposed to put like a little bit of gravel right around the drain so that when water gets through the mud bed, it can drain down into here. But the big culprit is that this is just straight to plywood right here. So water is not going to be able to overcome this and go into these drains. So we're going to have to, yeah, that's the main issue. But these are probably clogged as well. It's a big shower. All right, so here's the main problem. Take a look at this level. So it's completely level. So this is the main issue. There's no pre-slope whatsoever. So the water just sits here. Every angle is completely flat and level. So let me see the problem where it was. Yeah, it's just completely level. So let me show you here. This is the problem. So I'm gonna pull out this rubber liner. So you can see, completely flat. They didn't put any pre-slope underneath of this. So water just, once it fills up the mud bed, it just sits there. Luckily, I don't see any damage. So it wasn't leaking. It was just holding water. Now, I mean, it could eventually leak. That is a possibility. If water sits there long enough, it always kind of seems to find its way. But the second issue is that there wasn't anything around the weed pulls here. So even if it did saturate and was able to drain, all these weed pulls were clogged with mortar. So we have to stop using these type of drain systems. There's absolutely no reason to use them anymore. And this old rubber liner, there's just always issues like this, especially if somebody's doing it that they really don't know what they're doing. So we're going to tear this up. We're going to put in a better drain system, and it's really going to be foolproof and not have any problems like this. All right, so one of the things you might be asking is like, why am I gonna have to take this out of here? Well, in order to waterproof this, you really should at least come up 6 inches above the shower pan. just to make sure that there isn't any capillary water movement that kind of seeps up. So, you know, it would be very, very, very difficult to try to waterproof against this rubber liner here. And they do have cement board here. So that's primarily what this is adhered to. There isn't any waterproofing that I can tell on top of the concrete board. But you still have to take out this first row. There's really no way around it because there's really not going to be any really good way. Because by the time I put my new bonding flange on here, you know, our mud bed might even be higher than what the existing one was, and there's really no way to waterproof against tile. So you have to take that first row out of here. All this cement board is definitely not worth keeping. It's a pretty big mess, honestly. And grinding that down would be no fun. So I'm just going to cut this about an inch below the tile and go all the way around, and we're going to put new backer board in. You know, this is one area that, you know, it's not going to be waterproof the way you would really want it to be. But really, you know, having everything waterproof from like a foot down will really ensure that nothing's going to happen with the shower pan. But this is the one compromise you're kind of making, is that you're not able to, you know, seamlessly waterproof the entire system. We will put a little bit of sealant over top of the mortar here, so if water gets behind here, it will still be able to drain. Yeah, I mean, when you're getting into a repair job, you know, you just do the best that you can. So let's go ahead and remove all of this cement board underneath of here. So you can see this rubber liner covers the entire top of this, and then goes, overlaps and comes down. So we're going to remove this stuff underneath it here. Okay, so we're going to basically put sealant right along this seam where the cement board is to waterproof that to the cement board. Okay, more sealant, more go board. Probably more mud too. So I think we'll just call that a day for today. That demo definitely took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. But tomorrow we'll be able to finish off the waterproofing and get that mud bed down. And by day 3, we can actually get into start tiling some of this. So it definitely takes some time. It's going to take definitely a few hours per day to complete something like this. But having this all nice sealed against here now, I feel pretty comfortable with the ability to make sure that this stays waterproof. You know, especially having a good 12 inches off the floor. Because most of obviously the biggest part where there's a lot of saturation is the floor area, and having any thin set kind of bringing up water up the wall a little bit. Now this isn't ideal because I mean the whole concept of this bench was the rubber liner, but we're going to basically convert this to the sealant application with this waterproofing. So put a good generous bead on the edge of your bench. And what I'm going to do is just fill this whole area in against the tile here. We have to get away from drains like this. This has been working great for decades if you installed them properly, but over and over again, I see so many problems with this, mainly because either one, the weep holes clog and then the drain system isn't able to release the water, or 2, there was no pre-slope underneath the shower pan and therefore water is just saturating in the mud bed. So we really need to get into these newer drain systems. It really makes no sense anymore to use drains like this. This is a great system. This is called the Flo FX Drain. And what's great about it is that it's all bonded. It's a bonding flange. So when you put your mortar bed up to this, you can waterproof and seal to the actual drain surface. So you're not allowing the mud bed to get full of water. Everything's going to be topical. Right underneath the tile is where the layer of waterproofing is, and it makes sure that everything drains properly. So this is a much superior drain. Really isn't any more reason to use drains like this anymore. You know, it really, at the end of the day, doesn't really save a whole heck of a lot of money anyways. And again, there's all these issues with these systems that end up clogging or not allowing water to remove from the system, and then you get mildew smell and a whole bunch of other problems. So we're going to install the Flo FX Drain. And what's great about this system is that it does come with a flange that we can convert a standard drain assembly into basically able to use the bonding flange, not having to replace your actual drain assembly. So the first thing we need to do is get some holes to be able to drill through this so that we can mount this bonding flange to the actual unit here. Okay, so we're just going to dab a little bit of this sealant to mark our holes. So on top of these bolts. And then we just stick this over top of here. And then we have our marks. So now we're going to drill some holes into this flange. Now that we got all the holes all lined up, everything's going to line up. All you do is simply add some sealant to the bottom of this drain. So polyurethane sealant. You know, you can use silicone if you wanted. And we're just going to basically bond this to the existing flange, or to the existing drain assembly. Okay, so that's now completely sealed against that flange. And then what this will do is just basically you glue this into place, and then you have your bonding flange. We're going to get the floor prepped before we go moving on to that. Okay, since we're doing a mud bed, you're going to have to bond this to the floor. So the best way to do that is just to use some wire mesh, but you want to be able to isolate the actual floor from any moisture so that you don't suck any moisture into the plywood and cause any issues. So I'm just going to use this new type of felt. It's kind of basically a roofing felt, and I'm just going to place this on the floor before we put our metal lath down. This staple gun is awesome. Before, you'd always have to do hand nails, or like roofing nails, or regular staples, and it just took forever. So this definitely really sticks it down there very well. And I should mention, the main reason that I'm going with a mud bed is just because of the shape of this shower. It is completely off in every way. The shower drain, I mean, we're 3 feet from one side. Well, I guess that's almost 3 feet from that way. But it's a completely off, weird position. And then having these two corner benches and this little 45-degree wall really makes this complicated. I would have had to get a very, very large preformed shower base to be able to do that. Now, there is one other alternative that I could have done that would have made life a little bit easier in some sense, but I would have had to change out the actual drain system, or put new plumbing in, is to get a preformed like Schluter pan, cut it, and then fill in all the edges with the actual mortar. But really, this is gonna, with the way that this is all constructed, it's just gonna be just as well to just do it all mud bed rather than messing around with a different shower pan. All right, so for the drain, so we're gonna set this flange first, because that's gonna dictate how high we need to make this mud bed. So I have a little bit of a mud bed mix. It's a little wet compared to what I'm going to be packing with, and I'm just going to use this to basically put around my flange to support my bonding flange. So this is basically just going to glue right into my drain here and sit basically flat on the floor. So I want to put a little bit of mud bed mix here. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and put some thin set on the bottom of this. And this is going to bond the flange to the mud bed once that dries. The flange that we just put in there, or actually on the outside. It's really tough to tell what's square here. 26 and 8. All right, and we want to make sure it's level. And what's really awesome about this is that you can put some screws into the flange. They have little recessed holes here. So it does have to go down a little bit over there. So you can put these into these screw holes. And that really makes sure that you're nice and level. Good. Now my mud bed will go right up to that area. All right, so now that you have your drain all set and level, now let's go ahead and put our perimeter joint, or basically get our perimeter level area that we need to be able to do to make it slope. Now, rule of thumb on showers is 1/4 inch per foot. I actually prefer to go a little bit more than that, making it about like 3/8 of an inch. But it really depends on, you know, the type of floor that you're doing in a shower. But in my mind, if you're between 1/4 inch and 3/8 or even 1/2 inch, you know, all the better. So find your longest point from the drain. So in this scenario, it's this back bench area. Everything else is less than 3 foot. So you want to go to your longest point and then essentially put a mark on the wall, and also use your level for reference on there. But basically we have 1 inch at the drain location. So in 3 foot, that would be about 1 3/4. We might go a little bit higher than that just to give ourselves a little bit more slope. So we'll go 1 7/8, and then we'll mark the wall. So that's going to be our slope to the drain. So that's all the area that we're going to have to fill up. So we're looking at almost, yeah, 1 7/8 on the back wall down to 1 inch. Now this is going to be our indicator for the levelness all the way around the room, because now that this is everything else is going to have a little bit of a steeper pitch in some fashion to the drain. So we'll go from here all the way around, and easiest way to do this is actually get another piece of go board right here, put a little strip that's nice and level, so then you can just screed right up to that go board and make everything level. Rather than packing things level, you can certainly do that, but with all these different angles, it's going to be kind of frustrating, a little bit of a pain. So we're going to put some strips all the way around here, nice and level. It's good to go. All right, so this is gonna be the easy part of the project, honestly. Now that we got this perimeter all set up, everything's level, now we just have to screed to it. So I got my mud bed mix, so we're gonna start pouring some of this out of here. All right, for the mud bed, we're just gonna use a 4-to-1 sand mix. I usually just like buying the pre-made bags of this because all you do is add the water and you can go ahead and mix it. Now you certainly can just get regular sand and some Portland cement. It's just 4 parts sand, 1 part Portland cement, and mix it that way, but I find this to be a lot easier. Now this is gonna have to be a really dry consistency in order to pack this correctly. So make sure that you measure things. We're gonna use basically 2 quarts of water for an entire bag of this. And then another really helpful tool is this mud bed mixer. This guy is going to allow us to mix this really nice and dry. It's really difficult to use a power drill on any other type of paddle. The mud bed mixer really does make it really easy to be able to mix everything up in a dry consistency. And I bought a couple of these screed boards made by Troxel. They definitely make it a lot easier. You can use a level or a 2x4 even, but this definitely makes it really nice and even here. All right, so got our mud bed done. Again, word of advice, take your time at this. Don't get too stressed out. You can keep going over it. As you can tell, I kept going over areas and kept recompacting it and screeding it and trying to eliminate any of the divots and stuff like that. So you have plenty of time to be able to address this, but now we'll wait 24 hours. We'll get the waterproofing on and then set our tile. All right, so I made a mistake on my mud bed. I didn't compact enough of the area on the front edge of this pan. So as you can see on this back edge, everything's nice and solid. You know, there's nothing coming up. But on this area over here, I basically can pull this all out of here. So this is too dry and it's just all coming out. But don't worry about it. You can always fix a mud bed. We're gonna take out the areas that are bad and then redo that area. So mud is really flexible when it comes to that. So my suggestion is that whatever you do, that whatever area is coming loose, pull that area out, make it at least a ½ inch deep. You don't have to take it all out. It just has to be to where it's not crumbling apart, and then you can fill in with the new mud bed. So just to quickly go over why this happened and why my mixture did not work out well. It was basically rushing too much through the process of mixing, and I actually put a hole in the bottom of the bucket when I initially mixed my first bucket of mud. And that caused problems getting enough water into the mixture because it was leaking out of the bottom. I actually had tried to use a secondary bucket underneath of it to make it work, and that did not help out at all. So take your time when you're mixing the mud. The 2.5 quarts of water per bag is still the way to go. You just have to make sure that you have that fully properly. So as you can see here, I have water kind of coming out below it, and everything was just too dry. So take your time so you don't have to go through the painful process of tearing it up. Okay, so we're going to use a fast setting mud bed mixture. This is called AM100. It's a pretty specific product, but it's rapid setting so that we can move on with the shower pan. If you use the regular mortar bed, you're gonna have to wait another 24 hours before you can actually do anything. So this is requiring 3.5 parts or 3.25 parts powder to 1 part water. All right, so the waterproofing that we're going to be putting down on the floor is just a sheet membrane. This is Schluter Kerdi. And one of the main reasons I'm going with a membrane like this is that I don't have to wait for this mud pled to completely cure. If I wanted to do like a liquid membrane, I'd have to wait 3 days, basically 72 hours before putting that liquid membrane. The other thing about using a sheet membrane, it's a little bit more forgiving. You can add a little bit more thin set underneath of it if you needed to level anything out. So if you had any divots in your mud bed, and which I do, you could just fill it in and just skim over it. It's no big deal. So there's a lot of advantages to doing a sheet membrane over a mortar bed, but one of the biggest is time. You can just move on with the tiling. That's the other thing. Once I'm done with the sheet membrane, I can immediately tile this floor and save myself a lot of time. If you did a liquid membrane, you're talking about waiting another day if you don't do 2 coats of whatever you're doing. So liquid membranes are definitely an awesome way to go. Definitely check out my tutorial on that. But you know, sheet membranes are really going to be the most efficient when it comes to time. And then again, it's a little bit more forgiving with some of your imperfections if you had anything wrong with your mud bed. All right, so we have a Kerdi trowel, which is basically just like an 1/8 by 1/8. So you don't need a lot of thin set to bond this, but you do want to definitely work this into the surface to make sure that you do have a good bond. So take the backside of your trowel and work this into the mortar. And then do directional troweling. So here's a perfect example. This is a little bit of a divot right here. I could just flatten this out with the thin set and not be concerned about having a little bit of a bird's bath there. So that's where sheet membranes are a little bit more forgiving. Now, you can only do that within reason. You know, if you don't want to be more than, say, 3/8 of an inch trying to fill something in like that, but it's only about a 1/4 inch right there, so we're good. Okay, so I didn't really, for whatever reason, I didn't seam this properly all the way across here. You really need to have a 2-inch seam all the way across. Like everything has to be overlapped by 2 inches. So I'm just gonna add another piece of Kerdi band right down the middle here. Just measure down to a location of your water level on top of that drain, and then you can indicate that later on. Now, I am primarily just testing this for slopage and water. You know, if you really wanted to do this as a real flood test, you should leave this for 24 hours, come back tomorrow and check to see if the water level is at the same spot. But this is primarily just for purposes of noticing anything substantially wrong. You'd see air bubbles in areas where there might be a leak. And then also I'm just kind of testing the flow of the shower pan, make sure there isn't any bird's baths, any like low spot anywhere. So this is just gonna be a quick flood test just to give a little bit of reinsurance to myself and the client. But if you really wanted to do this 24 hours, and that'll really give you the real test of whether everything's good. Okay, so the material I like to use to make the templates is just basically 1/4 inch plywood. This shore ply stuff that I get from Lowe's is pretty nice stuff, but you just basically split it down into 2-inch strips so that you're able to glue them and template the actual shower floor. Now, we did end up doing this prior to installing the waterproofing. My my plan was to actually get into the tiling the same day as waterproofing, but you'll see here shortly why that did not happen and all in the same day. On it. So templates are definitely the way to go, especially if you have a really odd configuration like this. It's really the only way to be able to really, you know, outline things and make sure everything's going to look right and you don't get any slivers. So it definitely takes some time to lay some of this out, but it's definitely going to be worth it. So this template was completely tight against the wall. So I'm going to mark it with a marker, and then we're going to cut the line off to give ourselves a little bit of extra room between the outside perimeter. Because you don't want your tile completely tight to the wall. Plus we have wall tile coming down. It's going to cover the edges anyways. So you might as well give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. But looking at this, we basically are referencing the top ceiling layout, and we're matching that same, going in the same direction. But we're just looking around to make sure that there isn't any slivers, and this all looks pretty good. So we're gonna go ahead and mark this. So important note, always put an indicator up on your template, because I just cut everything in the flip reverse. I actually took down my template and I flipped it upside down, so none of anything worked. So I have to re-lay it out, recut it. Luckily, I had enough tile to be able to rearrange it. But yeah, that's a really simple, stupid mistake and very frustrating when you're trying to get things done. But tomorrow we'll get the floor down and get the rest of the wall tile down. Okay, so get everything laid out and then go ahead and mark the actual drain assembly. Otherwise, it's really tough to make this completely accurate with the template. So just go ahead and mark this, and then we'll cut our tile. Okay, so we're going to be using some Ultraflex RS, which is rapid set, made by Mapei. This is going to allow us to be able to set the floor and then finish the tile work around the perimeter all in one day. I always recommend doing the shower floor first, so you can overhang the wall tile over the shower floor tiles. Get any dust off of the floor. And then we're going to be using a Superior built 1/4 by 1/4. I mean, it's kind of a little bit, you can see how the ridges kind of are a little bit unique. It just provides really good coverage for tiles like this. But typically any type of 1/4 by 1/4 square notch trowel would work fine for this. And so we're going to go ahead and set this. So first thing is just use the flat side of the trowel, work it into that Schluter membrane. Go ahead and do some directional troweling. So now just go ahead and lightly set these into place. to go ahead and take your grout float and bed these into place. If you need to space anything, just go ahead and use a horseshoe shim to space that out. Feel over your floor, make sure that there isn't any lippage anywhere. It should be pretty flat. Okay, so the Flo FX Drain, kind of nice. Has these additional spacers that you can use to shim up your drain cover. So you just have to add a little bit of thin set to these little spacers. A little bit on the drain cover here. Just basically pack this thing with thin set all the way around. All right. All right, so quick tip, use a brush. Once this thin set hardens a little bit, use a brush to get some of that thin set out of those joints. And you have to kind of wait until the thin set's a little bit stiff to be able to do this, otherwise you're just kind of pushing things around. But this really helps get that thin set pushed down into the joints. All right, so the client tried to get some matching tile, and unfortunately it's smaller than the wall tile. So we're gonna, that's a solid 1/8 inch smaller than these wall tile. So unfortunately there's no way to make that look good. I was really hoping that we can just line everything up, but you can't have basically 1/2 inch grout joints. So we're gonna really just do the next best thing, which is just stagger the pattern. You know, this is less than ideal, but there's really no other way to go about it because the tiles just don't match. So, you know, it's probably better than the alternative of actually having to find a completely different tile to skirt this in. I guess that's debatable. It's always a design choice. So we're gonna do the best we can, and you know, we're gonna try to make this the best that we can, but this is what we're kind of working with here. So this was definitely the most painful process of this entire project, is fitting in these tiles. Basically, you have to do a lot of scribe cutting to make them sure that they fit to the bottom tile, and obviously making sure that that top joint meets nicely at the top. Horseshoe shims are really going to help you out here. And just to let you know, I used Ardex X5 for the thin set. That's going to be really helpful as well, because it has a great long pot life that'll make it easy and give you plenty of time to set all of these tiles.
You can just take a diamond pad and just kind of sand that up a little bit. And that's pretty acceptable right there. I could put that against the Schluter edge, no problem.
No, I don't. I'm just. So this little saw really is nice and handy, this benchtop IQ saw. It really does a great job of being dustless, and then you can put that 45-degree miter adapter on there to be able to cut 45s. And this is going to really help for the corners around the bench and then meeting into all these odd angles. So basically you just set one side of your wall and then you use an angle piece to be able to meet up into that corner. Now you will be caulking any of the corners, but this is going to make sure that you have a nice accurate finish towards those edges. And then similar to the shower floor, we're actually going to just template the top of this so that we can get some nice accurate cuts for the bullnose tiles. This is really helpful if you really don't buy a lot of extra pieces. But really, the idea here is to make sure that when you set your wall tile on this bench, that you kind of let it raise up above the shower bench just slightly, so that you can meet the bullnose nicely. And then lay those tiles out just like you did the shower floor. Trace basically your template, and then you can cut and fit everything nicely.
So wow, don't underestimate the time it takes to make all these cuts. It definitely took me a lot longer than I anticipated, and it also didn't help having tile that didn't match up with the existing, so that made it a little bit more complicated. But again, just try not to undercut yourself if you're a contractor doing this stuff. I mean, it took me basically 2 days worth of tiling essentially to get this done. Because I had basically the whole floor already pre-cut, and then it was just all these wall tile today. So it was definitely a challenge getting all of this to line up and being nice and even. So we'll just be ready to grout tomorrow and move on to it. But sometimes it really is difficult to calculate what kind of time you're going to take. That's why you can never go by square footage. If anybody asks you what's your square foot price on something like this, just walk away, because you would make nothing. This isn't that many square feet that we had to do, but it was really intricate. In a lot of ways, it's actually more time consuming than if I was doing a new shower. I would have probably had 2 of these walls done in the amount of time it took me to try to fit all of these.
All right, so we're gonna use the matching grout that was already existing in this shower, and we're gonna be using Prism grout. This is a high performance grout. This is something that is a little bit better than the regular traditional grout. You still have to mix it with water and mix it by hand. But the great fact about it is that it can go down to 16th inch grout joints, and also it doesn't need to be sealed. Basically, the molecules of the grout are really tight and then prevent any staining from happening, and which would in turn keep you from having to seal it. The other great fact about it is it's very fast setting, so I can set all of this, about 15 minutes later, start removing all of the grout and move on with my project. That's one of the real great benefits about something like this. You can really streamline and move on with the project. So we're just gonna mix 1 bag of this. Important thing about this fast setting type of grout is that if it's a very hot and dry conditions, this stuff is going to go a lot quicker for you. But you do want to just mix it by hand. Use some cool water. Make sure it's cold water, because the warmer it is, the faster it's going to set on you as well. That's the only one thing about these grouts you have to be careful with, is just how quickly they set up. We're in a humid environment. We're in 70 degrees in here, so we'll probably have the allotted 15-20 minutes. So add your water. And then this comes in 2 bags. Basically, this is a lot more grout than we need. We're just going to be mixing 1 bag of this. Okay, so first step is just to wipe down the surface that you're going to be first grouting. So we're going to do all the walls first here. And then a good grout float makes a real world of difference. This is a Trox grout float. It just has kind of a flexible ability to it, and it really does make it nice. It makes a real big difference. So just go ahead and pack all the joints. And this is really the main objective at this point, is just to fill them and making sure that they're even with the tile. So it doesn't really matter too much about how much you're really kind of leaving on the outside of the tile. It's just a matter of filling them joints. So one thing about floors, it's really important to have 0 water in the grout joints. So make sure that everything's dry, because if there's any water in those joints, it'll just wash it out. You just grout straight over this cover. This is one nice feature about this drain. You just grout right over it, get all those grout joints nice and tight, and then we'll be putting in the finished cover afterwards. It's more important to fill the grout joints than it is to remove anything off the tile, because if you don't fill the joints, then you're trying to touch it up later. So don't be too concerned about the excess grout, especially on these smaller tiles. Okay, so to test this, basically you want to be able to mold it with your finger and not pull too much of the grout off of it. But really the best way to test this is just to start wiping it off with a damp sponge and make sure that you're not pulling out any water. Now your sponge has to be just damp. It can't have a lot of water coming off of it at all, or you're just going to wash out the joint. But this has been about 25 minutes later or so. So I'm able to basically work the sponge and smooth out the joints, and I'm not pulling any out. And that's what you're really looking for. If you're starting to pull some of it out, then just wait. Some of this stuff is a little too wet. We could probably wait a little bit longer on the floor. But the main priority is just to tool the joint nice and smooth and eliminate anything from washing out. Now, if it does wash out, you could just wait and reapply. You could even do that tomorrow if you find a spot. But yeah, really just pay attention to the subtleties of the joint and just kind of smooth them out even with the tile. Okay, so that takes care of the grouting. Now, this is all going to haze over in about an hour. And so in about 3 hours, you can wipe it down, and then once it dries, we can caulk all the corners. But yeah, I mean, anything that you miss, you can also obviously touch up as well. Yeah, I mean, it's a really quick, efficient grout. It just is going to haze over and require you to wipe it down once again. Okay, so when it comes to caulking, we're going to go ahead and use the matching caulk for this. So just make sure that everything's dry before you go and use this. Okay, just spray down your caulk joint with a little bit of Windex. So you got the Flo FX Drain. So you just pop your cover off and then you just stick in your new drain. That's what's really awesome about this. There was no additional screws and these are interchangeable. So if you didn't like this cover, you could change it into something else. But it's also just really easy to pull out. It just pulls right out to be able to clean the drain. Just snaps right in. Very cool. Okay, so that wraps this job up. Definitely a lot of labor. I could see why a lot of people might not want to get involved with this as a contractor, because honestly, it took me just about as much, like day-wise, as it would doing the entire shower. Now, granted, this is a large shower. There's a lot of intricacy done here. So most likely it would have maybe taken close to 10 days to do this shower. But we did this all in 6 days. I worked a little bit each day to be able to do it. Everything kind of takes a little bit of time to be able to set up before you can move on to the next stage. So that's why it draws out for about 6 days. So day one was the demo and prep. That took me about 6 hours total. Did take a little bit longer than I anticipated. The mud bed was actually pretty difficult to remove. And then also the accuracy to cut out this existing tile. It does take a little bit of time. And you don't want to mess that up. You don't want to chip your tile, because then you're just going to have to keep moving up and go to the next format. So day one, demo, 6 hours. Day two was the mud bed prep. We did the mud bed, we put the new shower drain in, and that took about 4 hours, give or take, on that aspect. We also did a template. We created a template for the shower floor so we can prepare for the next day for the waterproofing. Day three was the waterproofing. My anticipation was I was going to do the waterproofing and set the floor tile, but unfortunately I messed up my template. I had it set upside down, so all the tiles that I had cut were not done correctly. So we were able to just get the waterproofing done. Waterproofing didn't take too long. It was literally about 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And then I went home and cut the tile for the following day. Day four was tiling. That was definitely an underestimation on my part just because of how many cuts and everything it took. But it wasn't all terrible of a day. It was about 5 to 6 hours of tiling this area. There was also a lot of dust and a lot of cleanup that had to be done that day as well. Day five was just grouting. That was a pretty easy day, about 2 hours of time cleaning everything out, grouting things. And then today is day 6, and we just did some caulking and finished everything up. So all in all, I had it written down here, I think we had 24 hours worth of labor, but you have to account for all the running around. So coming out to look at this estimate, going and getting the materials, and then maybe some things that you missed that you had to run back and forth. So overall, it was about 28.5 hours of my time to be able to do this. Now, as far as pricing of what all this cost, it really wasn't that bad because all we did was a mud bed, and that's usually the cheapest way to go. The drain assembly was about the most expensive part of the mud bed. It was 110 bucks. Then the waterproofing did add up because we'd used Go board for our wall backer board. Those are $40 a sheet. I needed 3 sheets. That's 120 bucks.
Got 4 tubes of sealant because we ended up redoing these benches as well. So it hogs up a bunch of sealant. That's not cheap either. That was about $45 in sealant. And then the actual waterproofing itself was actually kind of astonishingly expensive because it was $80 for just the membrane. But then all these little corners, these corners were basically about $8 a piece. So we have 8 of them in here. So that was almost $75 worth of corners. So overall, the material cost, not including the tile, I'm not really sure what this tile actually cost, but it was about $800 in material. Now there were additional things that I had purchased to be able to do this. You know, you always have to account for extra equipment. I got a new trowel, a lot of different things that you have to keep up with. Some different blades for the grout removal tools. So about $250 to $300 worth of additional items that, you just need to be able to do the job. So all in all, about $1,100, not too bad. And basically a whole heck of a lot of labor. So hopefully that gives you some calculation if you're a contractor trying to bid this out. Gives you an indication. Now I did only charge about $3,500 to do this project. If I were to go back in time, I'd be adding on another 25% just because I had definitely underestimated the overall time. I figured I was going to have about 15 to 20 hours, and I actually had about 28 hours total into this project.